Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Brooke.
And today we're really excited because we're going to go beyond what you typically think of when we say design.
We're talking about the design of things, and we have the best in the business with us, Yves Bahar. Think Jambox, Herman Miller, Puma, and more.
All right, here we are with the one and only Yves Bahar. Good to have you here, my friends.
Nice to be here.
So there's people who probably know all about you because you've certainly had a really illustrious career. But for people who don't know, maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and why they should know about you.
So I'm an industrial designer originally, and I moved to San Francisco, the Bay Area, about 23, 24 years ago. And for the last 19 or so, I founded a design consultancy named Fuse Project. And the idea around Fuse Project is to fuse all the different disciplines of design at the service of an idea. So whether it's brand or strategy or technology or user experience, they can be at the starting point of a project. They can be how a big idea is initiated.
How did that happen? At 15, did you know you'd be doing this today?
Actually, I did. Exactly at 15.
You make me sick. You're killing me.
Around that age, 15, 16, it was the 80s. I was a punk in Switzerland. And the beautiful thing about the punk movement is it's about making, right? It's about doing it yourself. It's about rearranging kind of traditional formats. So that's kind of trend / music / making phenomena is really what convinced me that that's where I was having the most fun.
Do you remember what your first product would have been?
I do. So I would go into my parents' basement and I would start put together skis with windsurfing. So I combined a skateboard with
That's like a death machine.
Pretty much. That was a death machine. And
like the death board.
And I would go on frozen lakes and essentially windsurf on skis and on frozen lakes in the dead of the winter. But I also made furniture, which tended to be deconstructed, made from materials I would find on construction sites.
Because at that point, you're designing because you loved it, right? So it seems like it would have been at the core, you're designing for yourself.
You know, I was a thinker, a maker. I was a writer at the time, but I didn't really have the skills. I had to spend from the age of like 18 till 23 until I started working, really developing the ability to draw, the ability to communicate.
It's cool that you found like a home for your talent, and I do want to ask you, like, what's your thoughts on talent in general?
It's always funny when people, when I hear them tell someone or tell me, oh, you're very talented. It seems like you haven't done anything for it. You were just born with it, and you're lucky.
Yeah.
But for me, it never felt like talent. It felt like passion on the one hand, and on the other, you have to work incredibly hard to make that happen. And so talent really kind of doesn't describe that, doesn't describe the love, and doesn't describe the struggle.
That's so true, because talent is a very, if you break it down like you just did, it's a very passive word, whereas passion is active and it has heart and soul and, drive.
And you put the hours in,
Right.
is what it comes down to. But what I also think is impressive is even just looking at something and deconstructing it.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I see these different elements is very much like a material. And what's happened since I've been here is that technology obviously has enabled many of the projects we work on, from lighting in the case of an LED light like this one, or even in the furniture work that we've done with Herman Miller, there's unique materials, and but obviously there's also a lot of technology products we've worked on.
So I'm curious about process. You talked a lot about material, and I know that a lot of times material can potentially inform the design. Mm-hmm. How does that, is that sort of like a linear process, or is it a back and forth for you?
To me, it is like that. It is a series of experiments, a series of accidents, a series of failures that eventually get you to the final conclusion. In the case of lighting, we started on this in 2002 when LEDs were seen as completely not viable and were seen as way too expensive, and just sort of a weird technology that was never going to make it, right? I mean, those are the kind of things you get early on. And to me, there was something truly magical about LEDs. I felt that LEDs were the future. I loved the environmental aspect of it, right? It had low power consumption. It lasts 15 years for a bulb. And so, but the form factor, the opportunity of the form factor was thinness, and but you still had a lot of heat generated. So I went to aluminum because aluminum is a way to propagate the heat. And so this wide sheet of aluminum became, with these distortions on top, became the way that I wanted to create the most amount of surface to air, so heat would dissipate away from the LEDs itself.
Right. Yeah. So when someone says, Eve, do we really need another lamp? You say, yes, we do.
Well, that's a question that, would you ask that question from a writer, from an author? Do we really need another book?
That's a very good point.
And to me, contemporary culture absolutely need another chair or another lamp, or another car for that matter.
So this is the leaf lamp.
This is the leaf lamp, yeah.
Herman Miller project, basically, right?
Yep.
I know there's more, but I think this is cool because people might know you about this initially. But what I think is fascinating too is you're on the cutting edge of technology and using it appropriately, And I mean, are you in love with technology? Are you a designer first? What do you think of when you? I know some people just love technology, and I want to have all the wires.
Yeah, at this point, can you divorce technology from design? I'm not just saying you, just in general.
It's as if saying, can you divorce metal from design, or can you divorce plastic from design? The interesting thing is, we need more technology in order to get less technology in our lives. We need more architecture in order to live in sort of cleaner, more minimal spaces, right? As we know, minimalism is a lot more work than, just average construction.
I mean, essentially, the technology becomes invisible, design kind of becomes invisible.
The notion that you just brought up, which is how do you hide technology, how does technology become more invisible, is really a design problem.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of examples.
Well, I think the example you're holding in your hand right
here,
I love.
The Jambox really sort of connected with people because music had become very personal and very selfish. Boomboxes went away, and what you had was headphones. So the people were keeping it to themselves. What happened at the time was, the smartphone, and the fact that you have your music on your smartphone, you have your music on your iPod, and so all that media was there, your games, your movies, but there was no way to sort of take it out and share it. Mm-hmm. And the Jambox became that.
Just the breadth of products that we have here. We talked about the Leaf and the Herman Miller chair to start with, and those are things that are, they look beautiful, they're functional, but also moving on to things that are for safety and things that are for education, and you have a lot of things that you've designed.
Yeah, I mean, some extraordinary things that happened when I started working with Nicholas Negroponte and the One Laptop Per Child, and that was in 2005. This really changed the course of our work in some ways, and changed the course of design in other ways. Because at the time, design was really seen as a luxury. Design wasn't something you saw in the developing world. It wasn't something you saw in communities that maybe needed it the most. Mm-hmm. And when we partnered together to do this, I immediately saw how much difference it makes for a child in South America, for a child in Africa, to receive a computer, not a hand-me-down, not something that's sort of being used in settings that maybe that don't relate to them and their needs, but something that's been designed specifically for them. And then a lot of other projects came about, which were very much influenced by the One Laptop Per Child.
I remember when One Laptop Per Child, when that was announced, and I was super inspired by it, really focusing on, like you said, the people that can't afford good design.
Yeah, and the fact that we were able to make it for a low price point, really kind of showed what design can do. For example, the keyboard was made out of a single material instead of a bunch of keys. A bunch of keys is very expensive, and so other projects happened from that. And this is the eyeglasses. We designed these for an organization in Mexico that distributes between 200 and 350,000 eyeglasses to kids in schools. The eyeglasses are almost indestructible. They're made out of a material that has a high distortion rate. But this was another incredible project, which is still going in Mexico and really making a difference.
I'm sure people see this stuff and be like, I want to do that. And I'm thinking, if I was to work at Fuse Project, like what would be some of the qualities you look for in designers?
We look for designers who are incredibly good at that one thing, right? Whether you in brand or packaging or industrial design or user experience, UX and UI. But we also look for people who are now so good at this that they feel comfortable working with other people in teams that, in our case, are always mixed between different disciplines. So if you come to the studio, you'll see groups of people working together, and generally there is at least 4 or 5 of the disciplines in every team. The third criteria is somebody who brings something unique. I love it when people have unique passions or really going to bring something that we haven't seen or that feels like an addition.
What do you do outside of design, like for fun, that you bring to the table, or not? But yeah, what do you do for fun? That helps you creatively,
I surf, I snowboard. I always have a couple of projects I'm doing with neighbors, with craftsmen, with artists. I don't really sit down too much.
Yeah.
That's really great. I kind of want to transition to the future. And future for you is kind of everyday life because you're always designing, probably at least 2 or 3 years in advance. You've done a lot of interesting things, the L'Oreal UV sensors, which are really neat. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit.
Yeah, can we talk about that? Because we've gone from a band to almost something that's like
really
invisible.
from some big to small, really, as wearables are getting smaller.
The future of sensors and wearables on the body is certainly how small they're getting. So what's exciting about the L'Oreal UV Sense, which you can place on your nail or you can attach it to a band, is how small it is and the fact that it doesn't even need a battery. It harvests energy out of its own, out of the way that it transmits information to your phone. It's really, really mind-boggling and extraordinary.
Yeah, and just to clarify for people who are maybe not aware of it, it detects the amount of UV that you're receiving.
Right.
When I hear about this, I'm like, we are living in the future. It's amazing.
In so many ways. I mean, it's I've been working in robotics and AI for quite a while. We probably are the studio that's really looked at that for a very long time. And it's really, really interesting how for specific health reasons, for times in our lives, older or younger, robots are really going to become a must-have.
From your perspective, I would think of I live in such a fascinating time to be here when the stuff is happening. Do you feel like that way?
Well, I think it's a whole new set of, a whole new set of thinking and philosophy and ethics. For me, it's been an interesting time because, in a way, there are new rules of design because in the past, you didn't have products that evolved with you as you aged. You have rules about what should the AI really do and how careful we are about making sure that the AI doesn't create dependence, doesn't make us emotionally dependent, provides a service but without replacing the human.
Being ethical with the technology and using it appropriately, is that kind of the...
Well, I've always looked at the work of the designer as both a tremendous opportunity to create new things and have fun, but also as a responsibility.
What are you looking forward to in terms of design in the future and maybe what you're looking forward to next?
I'm currently looking at prefab housing and the ability to create an entire system that includes everything that goes into the home. I think autonomous vehicles are very interesting. And this may surprise you. I also think crypto is very interesting, as in cryptocurrencies is very interesting.
Super exciting times, man. We're happy we have
Great.
This has been
such
amazing.
a
This has been a
legend
great
with
conversation.
us.
Yeah.
Right? So cool.
Thank
Hey,
you.
it's been so great. Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Yves Behar, everybody, thank you so much. Hopefully this kind of expands your mind as a designer, essentially, the many different areas you can work in. Thanks for watching.